And let me show you what the state's website looks like. For everybody that wants to apply, there is a really easy link to our website. Let me. Okay. As a quick link in, you can go tn.gov/fire, and that will take you straight into the State Fire Marshal's website. To get to the grants page, on the right-hand side, it says Fire Departments. You just click under Grant Opportunities, and this has everything that we have available. At the top part of this, it is for VFEET. Rescue Squad is just under it. And there's step-by-step instructions on everything. Right here is the link for tonight's webinar. After tonight, this will go away, and you'll click on this link to be able to watch a replay of the webinar. And it will be on our YouTube site, so you are able to go forward and backwards into those timestamps that Mary Beth was telling you about earlier. The very first thing when you get ready to do an application is getting all your financial information together. And I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly and let her explain to you what you need to have as the first steps.
Thanks, Michelle. So tonight I'm going to cover completing the W-9 form, which is one of the forms you need to gather and complete before you begin the application process. And the W-9 will be important for the organizational registration as well as your grant application. And I'm just going to cover the completing of the form. Michelle will fill in the space about how to apply for the grant in just a little bit. As Mary Beth and Michelle mentioned, there are resources available on the website. So under Rescue Squads, you'll see a couple of entries related to supplier registration. I'm going to show you. So supplier registration, Edison Supplier ID, FAQs. These will also be some resources that you can reference. I will be going through some of this evening, referencing those documents. So you have not only the webinar to go back to, but you will also have, if you need to print out something, you will also have that available. So I am going to start off, and we're going to talk about the W-9. And let me get the blank W-9 up. Can everybody see the W-9?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, perfect.
Yes.
Okay. So starting off, line 1 is going to be related to the entity that is going to be receiving money. So for instance, if the rescue squad is directly going to receive the money, it would be the name of the rescue squad, how you are legally recognized. If your money is going to come through another entity, such as a city, a town, or a county, this information will be the city, town, or county's information. It's very important to know who will be receiving the funds when completing this document. So once you've determined the name, if it is a city, town, or county, suggest that you reach out to the treasurer, fiscal director, someone from that branch of government to get their information. They will complete the form for you. If the rescue squad is receiving the money, such as a 501c3 or a nonprofit organization, then you will proceed with completing this form with the information. So the first line again, legal entity name. Box 2 will be blank. Box 3 is very important, and you will need to check one and only one box in box 3. So there's a box and a box. Check with the correct box that applies, and If you are other, such as a nonprofit, 501c3, or government organization, you will indicate that just to the right of other on the form. Box 4 will be blank. When you go to box 5, and I want to stress box 5, this will be the mailing address associated with the organization. This address will also match the remittance address that Michelle will discuss later on in the training. So just keep in mind those need to match. Additionally, this will need to ultimately match if you are registering for a Edison supplier ID, if you do not have an existing one. And I'm going to cover existing supplier IDs and registering for supplier IDs after we go through the W-9, because the W-9 is required for the application as well as the supplier ID. So I think I saw a question pop up about last year, and I promise I will cover that. I will cover that question when we get there. For box 6, this is going to be the city, state, and zip associated with the address. Box 7 will be empty. And next, when you get to part 1 and part 2, there's some very important parts to these. So you are going to have an employer identification number, because these are all going to be organizations. They're not going to be individuals, which is what you would put for a social security number. So you're going to enter the EIN, federally issued EIN, into part 1. Next, you're going to come to the certification. And this is a place where people tend to run into a little bit of trouble. So what you need to do is complete the form. You can complete it electronically, but you must sign it. It must be a wet signature. That is currently a requirement. So you'll need to print out and sign the W-9 and date it. Some people will have an existing W-9 that they've used for other purposes, but the date cannot be older than 1 year. So if something were dated 1/1 of 2023, we could not accept that W-9. It would need to be re-signed. So I went through that kind of fast. Does anybody have any questions about actually completing this form? There was a question, if you sent one last year, do you need to send another? A new current W-9 is a requirement for establishing an organization inside of Smart Simple, and is also a requirement for each application. And also, if you submitted an application for VFEET, if you're applying for a rescue squad grant, you will also need to submit another W-9 as part of your application process.
Thank you, Kimberly. I was actually about to address that item. If someone were a dual rescue fire, if they would need to indeed submit that second portion. And I would add, from the state's perspective, no one on this call is wanting any additional red tape. These are simply policies and procedures to make sure that the money's flowing as it should be over to you. So as has every member of staff here previously stated, and I don't think we can overstate, we are absolutely here to assist. So even if it's a minor question that you're not sure if that's exactly how it should have been addressed during the presentation tonight, please feel free that after the presentation you reach out to us, because in particular with the financial information, we really want to make sure that the funding is going to the appropriate means. And obviously we don't want to hold up any type of funding on our end of it. And that's in particular why Kimberly's going through those particular items. Kimberly is an invaluable resource to our office. So if you have any fiscal type questions, it is a great time while she's on the line to ask those type of questions.
Okay. If there aren't any questions specifically about the W-9, I will say this: Michelle will show you later in the training about attaching your W-9 to your organizational registration as well as your grant application, so that you can be prepared when you submit it. Okay, I'm now going to switch over and talk about registering for an Edison supplier ID. And before I talk about that, I want to cover a couple of general things. So if you have applied this year for a VFEAT grant, if you applied last year for a rescue squad grant, the likelihood you have an existing supplier ID is very, very high, because that was also a requirement as part of the application for VFEAT, as well as if you received a rescue squad grant last year and you received funding, you absolutely have a supplier ID. If you have questions about that, Michelle and her team have the ability to look up and can assist you with locating if you have an existing supplier ID, especially in those cases. And you can email them and ask them at sfmo.grants@tn.gov. They are also highly versed and have lots of information at their disposal, so they can assist you. Other situations where you may have previously applied for something or received funding from another state agency, there's a high probability you also have an existing supplier ID. So again, if you think you may have one, contact sfmo.grants@tn.gov and inquire before you start this next process of applying for another supplier ID. If you're a city, town, or county government will be receiving your funding for you, they most likely also have a supplier ID. And again, as I stated with the W-9 completion, reach out to them and they should be able to provide it. And people will call them your Edison vendor ID, your supplier ID, your Edison number. It goes by many different names. So again, we have lots of resources available to assist you to see if you do have an existing number to avoid having to apply for a new number. Additionally, if you were awarded last year, this information can be found at the top of your contract document under Edison Vendor ID. Okay. So now I'm going to move over and I'm going to actually pull up Edison and walk you through how to apply for a supplier ID. So if all those other circumstances that I just explained, and yes, an Edison number, a supplier ID are likely the same thing. As again, it goes by a varied number of names. But I'm going to take you into Edison. I'm going to walk you through. I'm actually going to go all the way through to almost submit one, and then I will show you what you will get afterwards. The steps that I'm about to take, there is a resource guide. Again, I cannot stress the amazing resources that the State Fire Marshal's Office has worked to put together on the website. So what I'm going to be walking you through is actually on the website. So feel free to take notes. You can absolutely reference the video, but there's also a step-by-step guide with screen snips inside the website under supplier registration. So to start the process, and also inside the guide is a link to the state supplier portal. Inside the document, there's a link and you can click on it and it should take you right to the supplier registration. But before I do that, does anybody else have any questions related to, do I need a supplier ID? How I determine if I have an existing supplier ID? Make sure I pause if there's any questions. Okay, so you will navigate to the state supply, this is called Edison, and you'll navigate and you'll go to register as a supplier, and you will click on that. There we go. Momentary pause. I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller so I can get a little more screen. Okay, so next you're going to click Start a New Registration and click Next. Okay. Now here you're going to enter your taxpayer ID. So this is going to be the same number. This is going to be your EIN from your W-9. So I'm going to, I'm making up a number just so everybody knows. And then you will enter here. It is important This information that you're entering into supplier for your supplier ID must match your W-9. It will be compared to your W-9. So make sure this information, your organization name, is exactly as it legally appears and is exactly how it appears on your W-9 form. Okay, so you'll put in what your name is. Next, you're going to click on, is the taxpayer identification number provided an employer identification number or social security? And you'll click the magnifying glass. And when that comes up, you have two options. Option 1 is for EIN, option 2 is for SSN. Everyone will be a 1. So you will click the 1. Right. Next, you're going to take and click on the paperclip here. So attach the IRS W-9 you have completed and saved according to the IRS W-9 instructions. So you'll click on the paperclip. And you will locate the file. So once you complete your W-9, you will need to scan it, or you are allowed to take a picture. You just need to make sure that it is a very legible picture, make sure it's not blurry, and also make sure everything, we can see all of the information that is on the W-9. So make sure top to bottom that it is there. So you will click on upload. You will click choose a file. I have a test document here, so I'm going to attach this and click upload. Once my document is uploaded, I can see that the file name is there. I can also, if you want to check it and make sure you selected the right file, that the file is, again, has that crispness to it that allows us to see all the information. You can click on view and it will show you what you have uploaded. Close that. Now I'm going to click on return, go back to the application. Okay, for the next remittance, you will actually skip this and move on down. And you will see there's a tiny little asterisk just to the left of each of the ones that are required. There are some that are not required. So the signed memo from the company remittance is not required, but the products and service offered is. So I'm going to click on the magnifying glass. For this, everyone is going to select line 12 and click return. The next question, are any employees of the firm currently or previously employed by the state of Tennessee? For this being a grant, you will answer no to this question. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to come all the way down. None of the other questions after the employee question are required, but when you get to the bottom here, there's a comment section. And we're asking that because you selected 12 and as well as the non-employee, we're asking that you enter into that you are a grant recipient. Okay. And that is associated with the question where we answered that it was other 12. So now after you've done that, you will just click next. Okay. Next, you're going to provide your primary address. So again, just like your W-9, because this information ties to your W-9, this address needs to be a mailing address associated with the organization. So we do not want to enter anything in this that is a physical address where you cannot receive mail. Okay. As part of that, you also want to ensure that the address is the correct address as the U.S. Postal Service. has it of record. And we have inside the document, there is a link to the U.S. Postal Service, and you can actually go in and type your address and it will return Okay, so I actually entered this address incorrectly to show you how so it will show you what you entered, and then it will actually show you how it should read. You do not have to include the last 4. You just have to include the first 5 of the zip code. But please use this resource to ensure that your address is in accordance with the USPS standards as well. There's some, like I typed out Parkway, and it's actually the abbreviation for the US Postal Standards is PKWY. If you use this tool to fill out your address, it will meet the standards. Any questions about the US Postal Service? I'm going to return. And one of the great things too is copy and paste. Actually, copy it right in. After you do that, there's no need for a remittance address. So you will just click next. And at any point, if you fail, as with any system, if you fail to enter a box, it will prompt you and say you need to complete this box. So if you missed anything with regards to a required field, it will absolutely tell you, please complete this field. Okay. Next, you're going to enter the contact information. And this is associated with who is entering the registration and who is going to manage it. And so I'm going to put my name as the primary contact. Okay. Down here at the bottom, you will need to create a user ID to use with the profile. All of these will begin with TN followed by @ and then you can choose what you want that to be. So I'm just going to do RS test. After you've completed that, you will just click OK. And it will return you to the screen and it'll show that the primary information has been entered. And I'll click next. Once you come to this screen, it's going to ask for an email address. This email address is who will receive the communication related to it. So if there is a conflict or a question related to the W-9 as well as the information that's entered, this is the email address that will receive that information. So it is very important to include a contact for those purposes. And you will need to reconfirm it. So please make sure, mine auto-populated, but please make sure you double check that email address to make sure it is accurate. Once you've done that, you can also review at any point here on the screen, you can review your submission and it will show you sort of in a one-page layout. everything that you entered. So you can also make sure you make sure too here you have all the asterisks. Even though the system will do it, you can check and make sure your information is correct. I'll also show you your information and the contact information. And if you do need to make a edit, you can return to that section just by clicking previous, and it'll take you back to the previous screen. You can save your registration for later. I do recommend probably before you start the process that you do sort of complete it. You'll have the document, so you'll know the steps that you'll need to complete prior to starting it. Once you're ready to submit, you'll just click accept and you will click submit. I am not going to actually click submit on this, but I will show you in the document on the website. I will show you what you will receive, which will be a confirmation saying it's been submitted, and you will be provided a registration ID. I suggest that you write down that registration ID should there be a question later on. That will be the number prior to you receiving it that you will need in order to reference that or work with us should there be an issue. And one thing is we will direct you to supplier maintenance, and most of the communication with regards to establishing supplier IDs will actually come from supplier maintenance, but should there be a question, that number will help us help you. And again, this is the document, and it's numbered. So I've just been following those numbers as I've been walking you through it. You'll see the screen, it'll be submitted. You'll have your registration ID. You should also get an email titled your registration has been submitted for approval. And it will provide you with the next steps in the registration. Please allow 10 business days for your registration to be approved. It could be less, but allow for 10. When you're working through the process, know that your supplier ID might not come in a matter of hours. And there are additional resources on the website for supplier registration that you can utilize. They are lengthy and they are more tailored to an organization that is supplying a service to the state of Tennessee. This guide is simplified and very distinct for the use of the volunteer fire departments and the rescue squad grants. So that is all for registering for a supplier ID. Does anyone have any questions? And I know it's a lot of information to take in. There's a lot of good resources. So. Okay, well, Michelle, I'll turn it back over to you, and I'm going to be on the call. So if somebody does have a question before the call is over, feel free to drop it in the chat and I'll be happy to answer it.
Thank you, Kimberly. Okay. And now that you have your financial stuff together, everything goes back to this page. This is where everything starts. Under the rescue squads, the guides that Kimberly just spoke about are right here under the Edison Supplier ID. A blank W-9 form is provided for your use right here. The step-by-step registration guide pulls up a PDF that will walk you step-by-step through this process that we're getting ready to do on the registration. It's very handy to be able to print that out and have that with you in case you have any questions or refer back to it for answers. But clicking on the application is the first start, and it will take you to our grant portal. The first time that you come to this, and this is everybody's first year in this new system, So to register, you will click here under to register or view grant funding opportunities. This is where you have a decision to make. And this is why we ask you to do your W-9 before, because you need to know whether you are registering as a 501c3 or a nonprofit or a city or county government user. And they're slightly different. But you'll come in and you'll put in your organization name. And I'm going to say ABC County Rescue. Okay, there says no records found. So that means I have to put it in. You fill out your name. Okay, this email is very important. This is the email that Smart Simple will use to contact you for all information regarding the grants. And one thing that we have found out, unfortunately, is a lot of the email companies have got their spam filters tightened down so much that our emails to you cannot get through. So if you use an email that is at bellsouth.com, comcast.com, bloman.net, benloman.net, dtccom.net, outlook.com, hotmail.com, or united.com, you will not be able to receive emails through this. And what we're advising you to do is use an alternate email. I know from experience, we've had a lot of luck with Gmail accounts, with Yahoo accounts, and with personalized ones like putnamcounty.gov. Those type of email addresses don't have a problem here. I'm going to use one that I have set up just to do this project. It's sfmo.test123@gmail.com. You have to tell it you're not a robot. One thing, if you are doing grant applications for more than one rescue squad, you have to use a different email address for each application you are going to submit. Your email address that you submit will be tied to the department that you are registering for at that time. Okay. Organization name. I've used Gallatin Fire Department as an example for others, so I'm going to use that again because it didn't take what I had before. If you don't have one come up, if it comes up not available, you click here and add your department name. And since it let me, I'm going to do the ABC County Rescue. I'm going to check that it's a rescue squad. I think that's the correct amount of numbers. Is it a government entity? I checked that I was applying as a government entity, so I'm going to say yes. Under what type of government? It asks you if you are a city or a county. And you check that. physical address 123. I'm going to say 123 Clark Street. Maryville, TN. And you can tell I'm doing this completely at random. You put your phone number and your email that you said you were going to use. And if you put the email address in before, it will give you that as an option there. Okay, your user information, this is who is completing the grant. And tell it you're not a robot. When you submit, what that will do, it tells you that you'll receive an email with a link to create the password and login within the next 5 minutes. And you have to click OK on that email. And it clicked me into a different email. Okay. It can take up to 5 minutes for you to get that email. Sometimes it's very quickly. If you refresh your system, it pops up faster. When you get the email, click on it. It says your username, and you click on the link, and it asks you to set up your password. You have to have at least 8 characters with 1 upper and 1 lowercase, 1 number, and 1 special character. You have to click that you're not a robot. And when you submit, we have a glitch. So what I'm going to do is just a second. I'm going to sign in using a previous, hopefully that's the correct username. And we are being difficult. And if you have any problems logging in the first time, feel free to call me and I will help talk you through it. When you log in the first time using your new username and password, this is the screen that you will have. And it will say that you're required to update your organizational profile. That is this button right here. When you click it, you have to click the edit button to be able to fill in things. And you will fill in your legal entity name. This is exactly what is on the W-9 that you completed earlier. So if it's ABC County, and if this right here is the exact thing that you're going to use for the remittance address, you can click copy the address above and it will normally do that. Caleb, we're having some issues this evening. If it won't let you copy the address above, just hand type it in, the 123 Clark Street, and it will give it to you since you've already submitted it as an option. And you can click that and it brings it down. The authorized representative, that is whoever is going to be signing the contract if you are awarded the grant. So if it's a county mayor, and his name is John Smith, and his telephone number is 865-456-1234. And his email is John Smith at ABC County Rescue at abccounty.gov. You put that in there and click save. Anytime you try to do an input and there's anything wrong, you will get a link like this up at the top, and it will actually tell you, and each one of these is a link. It will take you to the spot that you need to complete. So for this, you have to submit which grand division you're in. And you have to submit which county you're in. I'm going to say we're in Anderson County for ABC. And it's saying that I've got an invalid email because I made this one up. So I'm going to go back and use the sfmo dot test123 at gmail.com. Again, type of organization. What it's doing is it is taking you to the individual pages. It won't let you complete everything until everything is done here. So your type of organization with this, since I've said it's a county,
Hey, Michelle, can you mute everybody?
no.
Michelle, since you're
I think they're all
the
muted.
starter of the call, you should be able to mute everybody in the call, everybody participating. And for the purposes of this call, you can just put a nonprofit corporation, and we can have government added.
Okay.
For fiscal year end, you'll just put FY24.
No, I'm looking for the mute all button. And I do not see it.
Michelle, I got you.
Thank
I
you,
took
ma'am.
care of it.
Thank you. Okay. For fiscal year end, okay, ownership, it would be governmental for a government. And you can put the website if you have one, click save.
Your fiscal year end will have to be FY24.
Because I haven't completed this, it's going to say confirmation is required. On this, you have to upload your W-9 here. just drag it over into that box. You click, you certify all the attachments are current and up to date, and save. If everything is correct, you don't get any more red boxes up at the top and you're ready to go. Anytime you have a question or think that you're lost, you can click on the Tennessee logo up here and it will take you back to your overall dashboard. And here where it says one funding opportunity, it will have the Rescue Squad program. You can click Apply Now. The first thing you have to do is click Save Draft. Then you have to open the Delegated Grant Authority, which will be posted shortly. You have to download it. And then attest that the application was created and written by a human, not artificial intelligence, and that this applicant has the capacity to fulfill and provide the project described. Click Save Draft often. That way, if something happens and you accidentally shut yourself out of the program, all your progress is saved up until then. And hit Continue. You can move forward either by this arrow up here in the top or by the next button down here. The next button is your qualification criteria. You have to verify that you have an active charter registered with the Secretary of State's office. You've confirmed that your rescue squad is recognized by a local government in Tennessee to provide rescue services. This can be either your local city or your county. And you have to verify that your rescue squad has obtained an Edison Supplier ID or provided the completed W-9 form. Okay, the next page is general information. You can also move from page to page by clicking on these tabs. The next question is, did your rescue squad receive funds from the Rescue Squad Grant Program last year? If no, you just click no. If yes, it's going to ask how much you received. And look at your last year's grant contract to find out the amount. And say this applicant received $15,656. That's what they would put. The number of Category 1 type missions or incidents that are reported to TARS or TFRS in the past 3 years. I'm told when you do your reports to TARS, you list your category or Category 1 type missions. If you are a dual fire rescue that doesn't report to TARS but reports to TFRS, you can reach out to us and we can pull the TFRS codes that are the equivalent of those Category 1 missions for you that you've reported. So say 235 in the last 3 years. And this is your total expenditures for the last 3 years. So this would be for 21, 22, and 23. Say it's 75,000. Okay. Does your rescue squad work mutual aid with all first responder agencies within the county? And you will click yes or no. Does your rescue squad provide rescue services 100% within Tennessee? What that question is, we have some rescue squads that are on the border of Tennessee and adjacent state. If you provide services, say in Tennessee and in North Carolina, or Tennessee and in Kentucky, you would click no. If you are not in a border county, or are in a border county and only provide services within the state, then you would click yes. And in this, put a check mark on all services that your department provides. And again, hit Save Draft at the end of every page. Scope of service is your narrative. This year, we're limiting it to 1,000 words to make it quicker for our selection committee to be able to move through all these applications. So what I advise is that you type it out in whatever your word processing document is, and then copy and paste it over. And when you get it there, hit Save Draft and move to the next one. The next is your budget. First thing, when you get to the budget page, save the draft. And then you will click the plus sign. Anytime you see a box like this, it is instructions that are very critical for you to follow. And this one, you click save before you edit it. When you do that, it gives you the budget details line. Click that. And since it is pretty open and you can apply for anything you want, click the checkbox and describe it. If you are needing a saw and you have one saw in stock and you need to replace it because it's old, tell us how old it is. Say your saw is 15 years old and you do not need a new one. You are done with that, or you need to tell us how much that saw is going to cost you. Say the saw is $50. For the next thing, you come down and you click another row. Say you need a jaws. And right now you don't have one of those. So you're not replacing any items, but you're wanting to add one new one. You need to put then your price of that. Say it's $1,000. It will automatically calculate your total. If you needed another type of cutter, you would hit add your arrow. Say you don't have that. Now let's say you have 3 of those in stock, but you need to replace one. And you're needing 2 new ones. And you don't leave a price in there. When you click save, it's going to tell you that you have to put how old anything you're replacing is. And for right now, there's a glitch in the system. And even if you're not replacing anything, it wants you to put a 1. And you're going to have to put in a price to be able to enter. And you click save. When it does that and says save complete, you X out up here On the next page, you save draft, X out again, and save draft. And what you put in up there will populate here on this screen. And it will show everything that you have in stock, what you're asking to replace, the average age of how old they are, the new number you're asking for, and it will give the total number that you're asking to purchase. Click Save Draft on that and go to the next page. This is for your roster. On that, you click the Add or Edit Members, and you have to list all active Rescue Squad members on your roster. You click the plus sign and you put in their name, John Smith. And if they are a member of the fire service or have had any training at the Tennessee Fire and Codes Academy, they will have a PSID number. Put that there if they have it. If not, leave it blank and you add the next row. When you finish that, click Save, close it out, save draft, and it should list all of your members that you had. The next page is supporting documentation. You re-upload the W-9 here. And any attachments. If you have estimates for any unusual equipment, put those here. You would upload them and then certify that you've attached everything that is requested and hit Save Draft. Organizational contacts. This is whoever you have put in as the authorizing official. And when you start the first initial of their name, it will give it to you. When you click below, you're affirming that everything contained in the application is accurate, and you click Submit. It will ask you, are you sure you want to proceed? If you get this alert, you've done it correctly. If not, you will get a box up here in red, and it will list any deficiencies in your application. And those deficiencies that are listed will be clickable links. And if you click it, it will take you back to that part of the application for you to fix it. But you will always come back to this last organizational contacts place to submit. And you will get this application submission successful. And when you click home, it takes you back here and it will show one submitted. If you start an application and you get to that part, and say you got to the general information and you did not have all the information that you needed, you can click Save Draft and go back up here and click to take you back to your dashboard, and it will show it as one application in progress. When you log back in, you can click on this application in progress and it will list it here. It will tell you the last time you were in it. And if you open it, you can pick right back up and continue your application. And once you complete it, you actually can hit the submit from any page in the application. So, and when you submit, it will send a PDF copy of your application to your email account for your records. So does anybody have any questions so far about anything that we've covered?
Hey,
Michelle,
Michelle, there
I
were
have
two. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I will be applying for the fire department, and under the qualification criteria, I notice it has to have a charter. For that, do we still need to click the box and upload like a supporting documentation from our mayor saying that we provide rescue services?
Yes, you do.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody needs to attach a letter from either their city mayor or their county mayor attesting that your organization provides rescue services for that jurisdiction. Any other questions?
We've got a question in the chat, Michelle, about the TARS reporting.
Yes. Can you read that question to me?
Yes, it says when you have a chance, what is a type 1 mission in regards to TARS reporting?
Okay. I was actually given the definition of a type 1 mission last year by TARS.
And I think it is, I don't know if you have it handy, Michelle, but it is on the TARS website and it describes what a category 1 is. Mary Beth, I don't know if you still have that available either. Regardless, we can post it with the video.
Yes, I was actually, Kayla, thank you for that. It is posted on the TARS website. That was previously provided to us from the director, a distinction between category 1 and category 2. Off the top of my head, I believe category 1 was an individual response, but I'm looking for that and we'll still provide that response. Obviously, we do provide FAQs. Michelle, do you know the date off the top of your head that those will be posted on the grant website? Because we'll provide that immediately after this meeting either way.
I don't know the date the FAQs are supposed to be posted, but I anticipate it to be sometime next week. But we'll provide that information on the type 1 instance.
Absolutely. And I know that previously I provided that to Kurt Taylor, and we'll provide that through the organization widespread, a category 1 definition that is on the TARS website. Thank you for that question.
Michelle, I also see that Jeff Stewart had a question, combination department, rescue, or volunteer department. Jeff, if you're still on the call.
Yes, I was just asking a question, if a combination department will fall under a rescue squad or a volunteer department.
Okay, if you're providing rescue services on this, you would check rescue squad. That's required to be able to see this opportunity, this funding opportunity.
Okay, thank
So I
you.
think and I was about to say, just to reinforce that, rescue squads are not defined within the statute, so it's fairly open-ended for that services type. And so if you are a combination department, to apply on the fire side, you would be required by statute to be recognized by your county government. Previously, when we had worked with TARS, we had put forth the requirement that it was quote unquote affirmed by your local government that you are providing rescue squad services, but there is no definition for rescue squad. So I just want to be completely transparent with that point. Thank you.
I see MCRS has their hand raised.
Yes, on the letter from your county that you just mentioned, does it have to be dated within a certain amount of time?
It needs to be within the last year, I would think. Yeah, we need to know that you're currently providing the rescue services for that jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I see another hand.
I was going to say Joseph has his hand raised.
Yes, Joseph.
How do we get the TFERS report from you all?
For that, you can email Kyle, or you can email the sfmo.grants@tn.gov, and we can provide you with that number. And to explain to you how those are equal, last year we sat down with the executive director of TARS and went over every INFRS code item by item. And he told us which ones went together to be equal to those, the TARS reporting. So we are looking at apples and apples.
Thank you, Michelle. And I did want to provide just a quick update. I was able to provide that or outline the category 1 responses question. Category 1 responses are defined as any call that your agency responds to within your primary response area, with a category 2 response being any call your agency responds to in relation to mutual aid.
There's also a question, Mary Beth and Michelle, in the chat. If we also provide emergency ambulance services, those calls do not count as category response. Is that correct?
I think that is correct.
It sounds correct from my assumption of last year's discussion that Michelle just previously referenced. I believe those were excluded from those call types that was previously mentioned.
There are like 12 INFRS type codes that go together to equal this. But they're more, the car wrecks, the extrication. It's the rescue services.
Okay, there's one other question in the chat. What are the chances of us getting this grant since we received one last year?
Okay, in the scoring, it is taken into consideration if you were awarded one last year and if you were awarded over, Mary Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, $7,500 last year.
I don't know that amount off the top of my head, but I think we could say that in a foul swoop of no. It doesn't necessarily harm your chances. The selection committee, which is made up of the peers within the call here, 6 members are appropriated from TARS. So I like to say it the best way that I could within the fire service, the same difference. For rescue services, it's the same. You are amongst your peers. And so part of that particular circumstance is the fact that amongst the scoring, I can tell you we just completed last week the volunteer fire side of it. And the highest score in each grand division was not necessarily the highest award winner in each grand division. So I think it's very important to note too that the scoring, and my assistants here interrupting the call, but the scoring in particular does provide some context. But the selection committees on both the volunteer and the rescue squad, in my opinion, have been incredibly diligent and looking at all of the factors that are before them. What is the budget? What is the amount of calls that are being made? We don't want the equipment to sit there. I mean, that's a comment that I've heard so many times amongst the selection committee of both sides of it. So I think that it doesn't necessarily harm that. It just puts you within the scoring limitations. And from what everything that we have been able to see, we're also providing huge scores for where you're located. How many calls are you running? How many types of services? So that emphasis on those entire points there that I've heard continually from rescue squad members, those are incredibly, quite frankly, more important in terms of the scoring application overall. I hope that addresses that question.
Miss Sherry, did you have a question? Sherry Pruitt? I can't hear you. Hold on. Kimberly, can you help me unmute her?
Who's trying to ask the question?
Sherry, Preuett.
It is not letting me unmute.
Miss Sherry, can you type your question in the chat?
Michelle, while she's typing, there is another in the chat. Our county commission passed a resolution in November 2022 recognizing our agency as a rescue squad serving within the county. We used it for the grant last year. Do we need to get that updated, or is that sufficient for this year's as well?
I would think that would be sufficient.
I concur with that statement. If you received one previously for last year's grant cycle, that would be applicable for this year's grant cycle.
Any other questions?
What are some of
Nope.
the common issues that you all are seeing that would cause someone not to be awarded?
I can't think of any issues that would cause someone not to be awarded, but the most common issue we had to send the fire grants back for corrections was issues completing the W-9 forms. So if you watch the video and you follow along with Kimberly's instructions for that, you shouldn't have any problems. It's mainly making sure that W-9's correctly or done correctly and giving us the whole picture. And where the budget is this time, and you can put in everything where you're putting it in completely from scratch. Make sure in your narrative that you tell us what are your main priorities. If the selection committee can only afford to give you one thing, what is your greatest need? What's your need after that? You know, kind of give us the order that what you're asking for is important to you and why it's important to you.
I completely echo Michelle's response there. When it comes to any of these, in my opinion, an application is that it's providing data points. But quite frankly, that narrative allows the selection committee to see the human aspect behind it, and not just that for you to outline yourself what is most important. So, what comes down frequently is maybe the selection committee only has, let's say, $20,000 to appropriate at the very end. So we've had our $3 million pot. We have $20,000 remaining. What is the most important thing? They know from that they can't afford an air compressor. But if you've notated this other item that's particular to extrication that they can afford and they know you can, that may be the high priority item in which they award at the end of the money. But they wouldn't know that just based upon the data. That narrative really, truly is an emphasis of that. And I would say that to Michelle's previous point, Kimberly's outline of the fiscal information that's necessary. So that W-9, it's absolutely critical that we get that information filled out. I would even call that as a barrier. It's just sort of a hurdle that we've all got to cross to be able to make sure that we're getting all of the money appropriated in the appropriate place. But I would say that, quite frankly, the most preventative item is not really providing that selection committee with a human approach to that grant. And I think there's another question here in the
Yes.
chat.
Yes,
Do
Miss
I-
Sherry's
I'm sorry.
question's in the chat, Michelle.
Okay.
My understanding last year, the emphasis was on personal protective equipment, and this year is more on rescue equipment like saws, boats, etc.
Okay. Personal protective gear is always the priority for the rescue and the fire grants. We want to protect the person that's out there doing the job. That's most important. That said, the extrication equipment and the other grants are eligible. However, anything with a motor other than a motorized stretcher is not eligible. Boats, SUVs, the little side-by-sides, those are not eligible items.
To add to Michelle's point, in the very beginning of the volunteer fire grant, which turned our conversation to other organizations, including rescue squads that provide a number of services for safety purposes, when it really came down to it, they were hearing from a number of organizations, including many people represented through this call, that there was not enough money, not enough operating budget to be able to provide someone safe equipment to come home safely at the end of the night for their family. So really the truly emphasis of this grant program is that, but there are no restrictions on the rescue squad side, with the exception of the engine motor portion that Michelle just covered. So if, for example, an enclosed trailer were to be included in that, and I think that's been a common question, that would be for the selection committee to decide. We just went through again, referencing the volunteer side, volunteer fire side. When we went through that, occasionally washer dryers and thermal imaging cameras were thrown in, but still the emphasis after so many years remains this, that we want to ensure that everyone on this call, everyone involved with folks across the state of Tennessee who are making sure that our folks are safe, that our citizens are safe, that they are coming home safely to their families as well. So that emphasis really truly remains on PPE.
Mary Beth, we had a question about what about motors for boats? Does that fall under the same prohibition?
Previously, the anything that was engine related would be related to that. I think that, quite frankly, I'd need to look at the exact language within the DGA, but it's very similar to that. I think that anything that would not be directly related to PPE or what we would say is an external purpose of that, I think that would be probably something the selection committee would really need to look at. But I think that motors for that would probably fall under the application of the engine prohibition, but I need to look at that more clearly.
Okay. Dwayne, get a question?
Yes, I was curious. We applied last year for a grant, and the person who did the application online has retired from the squad. Are we going to have a problem logging in this year and getting in there, or I mean, as far as changing the emails and all that?
This is a new system that honestly we've spent the last 8 months working with developers building. So everybody is going to have to register from scratch this year. So
Okay.
no, what you had last year shouldn't cause any problems. The main thing is do that W-9 first and make sure that your data matches.
All right. That's what I needed to know.
All right. Thank you. Are there any
And
other
with-
questions?
I wanted to add a little something to that, Michelle. And if you have an existing supplier ID, you do not have a need to go into register for a supplier ID or make any changes at this time. So you do not, if you have and the person is left and they potentially set up your supplier ID, for the purposes of the grant, you don't need to get back into Edison. That should be, that hopefully will help quite a bit.
Do AEDs count? AEDs, there's nothing that says that they're not an eligible item. So you can put it on your application, write out in your narrative your justification for why you need it. And honestly, that's up to the selection committee.
Did y'all say boat motors were not covered?
Correct.
So we're going to put this in writing just to make sure that any version of this question puts out just firmly the selection committee, but we have limitations in terms of funding. There's $3 million statewide. So anything engine related, including a boat motor, would not be eligible. The selection committee will decide beyond that. So whether we're talking about other expensive items like let's say a drone, for example, thermal imaging camera, enclosed trailer, that's something that the selection committee will decide. But if it's engine related, is not allowed under the particular rules of this program.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay. If after tonight something comes to you and you have a question, just send us an email at sfmo.grants@tn.gov and we will get back to you as soon as possible. If you have trouble registering, you can send me an email. Like I said, we haven't had problems, I know, with Yahoo accounts, with Gmail accounts, but some of the other big ones, the spam filters create problems. So, one last call. Any more questions? Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I think we had a great crew, and this video should be up on the website by tomorrow evening. Thank you, and have a good night.